Afternoon. Steph here. Sat here with some arrows. Various arrows. Most of them missing fletchings. So what I should be doing right now, but I'm sort of procrastinating. I need to stick a bunch of feathers onto some aluminium arrows there. And I also need to turn these hazel shoots into a long arrow to be fired out of an Iumi. So I figured I'd sit here and give an appreciation for the arrow for a minute. Because one of the first things I learned with bow making is that arrows are really complicated and important and require their own workshop because they take that much work to get right. So what do we have here? Let's start with the first arrow I interacted with, which is Mer's old arrow, one of her 3 aluminium ones that we had left over. Pretty beat up now. Did a whole bunch of testing with this arrow and learning with this arrow as well. I was firing it off my first bows, which you could argue are traditional bows and not made for this. So it missed a lot and it didn't hit the target a lot and it's caused damage. This is part of what spurred me on to learn, because not only was it the wrong arrow for that type of bow, although I did shift to making the bows accommodate aluminium arrows because I saw the value, it's too short. So that was my first thinking. Firstly, I needed to make an arrow that was long enough for the bows, and that's why I learned that arrows are really complicated and need their own workshop, and I should probably just go ahead and buy some. Yeah, took a stab at making my own one, and for that I used one of these, a little bit shorter than what the Iumi is going to ask for. I'm going to have to something like 34, 36, 38 inches for the Iumi, depending how long the bow wants to draw. Typically around 30, 31 inches. It's a nice piece of hazel, this. I've not managed to make them this good since. Makes a really good arrow. It's very hard and it's very light. And it's not particularly bendy. So they can go quite thin and they fly real good. Must be a good moment to mention, well, this is probably one of our first arrow materials in England here. This hazel is abundant. Let's talk about the first component of an arrow is getting the raw material. And hazel grows, you've seen it, grows in bundles, grows in a shrub-like tree. So lots of small shoots surrounding bigger trunks, and the bigger trunks can be used to make bows. The small shoots make perfect arrows. It will be a perfect size. Got an unskinned one down there. But you need to skin the bark off it. These are still green. And it will be a perfect size, so whereby you take the skin off and it's pretty much at the thickness that you want it to. Other ones will be thicker and will need a bit more labour to take down. But you put yourself in the shoes of a prehistoric person, firstly inventing the bow, surviving long enough to invent it, and then building arrows for it. That is just the perfect little arrow factory. Yes, they make a really very nice arrow. I'm looking forward to these. This one's cured up now, I think. What do they? You can just bend them into place. Don't really need a heat gun to do it. They do bend out of place, but then you can just bend them back in again. So yeah, very versatile, cheap, accessible. Accessible is the important word there. Material to make an arrow out of. I believe Douglas fir is the best. That is the A grade arrow material. That's it's a lot more energy that will go into making an arrow from that. You've got to cut the tree down and then release a stave of wood or whatever. These are just hanging around on the side of a tree. So yeah, you can understand why that would be one of our first arrow materials for sure. Let's go through each component. I say each component on a bow is really important. Every last component on the arrow is equally as important. Unless it's all in place, it's not going to fire correctly. Well, if all your arrows are the same and they're not right for the bow, you can become accurate with that equipment. You just compensate in your shooting style to make it work. You can change the arrow to match the shooting style instead. So in the pursuit of accuracy, every last component on this would have been honed as you do with the bow. So you've ended up from a primitive stick bow all the way to a a compound bow or a layered up composite recurve bow, something like that. It's all just very small tweaks to bring in the accuracy. Yeah, so we'll start with the knock on the hazel arrow. We've got a self knock. I could install, look at that, one of these plastic knocks. That's labour intensive again, and say once again in the mind of a prehistoric person, we haven't got plastic knocks. So how we done it? You self knock it in the twine. Since the grain is running down the middle of the arrow, naturally it's going to want to split down the middle of the arrow as well. And you put an awful lot of pressure in the middle there, which could just send the string straight down the middle and break the arrow, and therefore break your bow as well. It effectively dry fires it. I had that happen once. It's not good. So after that, decided to wrap up the end. That doesn't take much twine. You could use all manner of things to twine the end here, but what you're trying to do is just hold that grain together and then not cause too much of a kick. And I see certain bows it won't be much of a problem. You have the bow out of the way, so you could have, it doesn't really matter that you've got twine wrapped around here and here. That'll take us down next to feathers, nature's perfect flight material. Fold out the way, trim nicely, so you can pick the size and the shape. And that is a good time to mention what they're actually for, which is just slowing down the back of the arrow. If you're trying to create stable flight in your arrow, slow down the back of it and weight the front, so the front pulls forward and the back drags backwards, and that stabilizes your arrow. Of course, you could shoot an arrow without fletchings, but that requires your arrow and bow being perfectly spined to each other, and then of course the human shooting it correctly. This is how we figure out if bows are working right, by bare shaft shooting them, so that your fletchings aren't correcting any issues that your arrow and your bow and you have caused in the firing bit. So yeah, these are the last thing you consider for your arrow. First and foremost, it needs to be the right length, the right stiffness, and decided what tip you're using at the end. So what tip you use at the end defines how stiff it needs to be, because it's going to make it bend as you fire it. It's going to add leverage on the arrow and cause it to bend more, so you might want it to be a little bit stiffer. God, it's so complicated. I think it's just a stick and some feathers on the end. So no, it's not. It's really complicated, really important stuff. Yep. I guess it's a good time to bring us on to aluminium, because for a long time, wood was the only material that you could use in an arrow. I guess aluminium does exist naturally, but not an amount that you can make an arrow out of. Is super valuable until people figured out how to create the alloy. But come World War II and start needing to make lighter materials for planes to war with, we end up with aluminium. So sport archery after that had access to aluminium to make arrows out of, and then you can design your bows around that. And carbon fiber came shortly afterwards. I'm quite sure with carbon fiber. But yeah, they hold all the same principles as the wood arrows do. They need to bend or not bend a certain amount. They need to be able to be tipped, weighted at the tip in different ways. And they used feathers. I see my mum's one's fletched instead of veined. Yeah, exact same principles again. But the reason I prefer them is because unlike wood and fiberglass and carbon fiber, they are much less likely to shatter. Yeah, could argue that carbon fiber is stronger and lighter, but it's made up of a whole bunch of little fibers, and if they do break and they end up in your hand, let's say, there's all manner of places that an arrow could end up if it breaks when it's firing. A metal detector isn't going to find them. If you go to a hospital, an X-ray will not pick up wood. Oh, then again, would it? Oh, so someone who knows more could actually tell me that. Aluminium, no problem. You're going to be able to find that. A metal detector is another thing that you can use with aluminium that you don't with the others. Say if you lose them in a field, they dig themselves into the ground, you can find them with a metal detector. Yeah, the X-ray machine, you have to let me know. At the very least, it's going to be real tricky to get bits of carbon fiber and splinter and fiberglass out of you if the thing does shatter and end up in your hand or any other piece of yourself. So this is something I really like about aluminium. Yeah, aside from the fact that it's, you know, stiff, good flying arrow material, it seems safer to me. Good stuff. But they need feathers. I can mention the feathers quick alongside these. So something with we talk about the style of archery and another choice that you'd make for your arrows. Obviously the Iumi arrow is going to be longer. It's naturally going to be more bendy in that because of that. So compared to, you can see that this traditional arrow, neither of these were fletched by me. It's funny to remember. I started making bows and then I started understanding archery. So all this became clear to me really just recently. So you'd need larger feathers to compensate for the less accurate nature of this arrow compared to this one. So this arrow is designed to be fired from a center cut bow, meaning there is less odd trajectory, odd flight for the fletchings to set right. So on this style of arrow you can get away with a really very small feathers. If you're shooting outside and if you're shooting inside as well is another thing. There's various things you can change about your arrows to match you and your bow and the environment that you're shooting in. And as a result, they're very complicated. But like I say, if you're serious about accuracy, if that's your goal, and you want to look past just your technique, and you need to start looking at your gear really very hard. It's just the tiniest little adjustments. It could be snipping a quarter of an inch off the end of your arrow. It could be all you need to get your arrow firing correctly out of the bow that you have at the draw length that you are. Tiny little adjustments like that. Yeah, the knock. The knock's probably the tiniest adjustment you can make with the biggest effect. Well, aside from the, we'll call it tinier than a spine adjustment. The knock, if it's too tight, it's going to hold on to your string. Let's put these other arrows down. If it's too tight, it's going to hold on to your string, and your string will be grabbed by it, and then it will release at a bad point, and that causes the arrow to fly funny. If it's too loose, it's going to move up and down on your string. Unless you're knocked really very tight, you've got your knocking points on either side. See, Ollie at Wales Archery Specialist showed me a video when I went there the other day of someone shooting slow motion with one knock on there and then with two knocks on there, and you can see the difference it makes with it sliding around. If you're going to chase accuracy, you've got to start looking at every single component really very hard, and then you understand it, and then you can change it, and then you have power over what your equipment does. The tiny little considerations, all worth making. So it makes a better shooting experience. Yeah, right. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed my little chat about appreciating the arrow. From someone who knows nothing about archery. No, I'm getting there. And that is the takeaway. Arrows are complicated and really important. Keep on trying to understand them. Thanks again, everybody. Yeah, thanks for the subscribes, and if you want to help me build this channel, subscribes and likes and comments and things, all really helpful, please. Yeah, the more we can learn together, the better. We can fight the rubbish algorithm on YouTube with cool content, cool affirming, brain affirming content. Get rid of the trash. Yeah. Thanks again, everybody. Good archery.